Hello. Awesome. Welcome to the webinar for Senteon and CIS, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. So we're going to kick around a couple minutes, let people funnel in and get this started. But Rich, how you doing today?
I'm well, wrapping up the week. It's been a good week. How are you, Zach?
Oh, excited. Been kicking off and we got Henry popping in. But been a good day. It's pretty early here. I'm in California. What about yourself?
Upstate New York. It's chilly. I got my overshirt on. It's cold here today. I've been cold all day.
Upstate New York's been in the news quite a bit. Everything all right in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, I'm looking out my window. It's been smoky, and we had a company meeting this week, which was awesome in Lake George, New York, and it was very smoky. So it's good to see it's starting to clear a bit. But the smoke's been an issue in this part of the world.
Yep. Well, appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to start kicking us off into the series. So welcome to the Senteon and CIS webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. So I'm Zach, your host from Senteon, and I have Rich here with me from CIS to help co-host this series with me. The series will be weekly, going a few months into the future. What we'll talk about today is there are quite a few hundred of CIS benchmarks just on a Windows OS alone. So a lot to cover in the weeks and months to come, and I'm excited to go over that. Before we do go too deep into the webinar, Rich, do you mind just kicking us off with an introduction of yourself and how you got into the cybersecurity world?
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. So I graduated upstate New York boy. I graduated from Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, and joined Apple Computer for a brief period of time, and then a software company that was acquired by IBM. Spent most of my career at IBM, and got involved in selling some IBM security solutions like QRadar and identity and access management solutions and things like that. I kicked out of IBM and worked at a systems integrator. We did a called Sirius Computer Solutions, and we did a lot of security architecture reviews and things like that. That's where I really started to learn the value of the CIS controls and the CIS benchmarks as secure configuration guidelines. It's also when I met Steve Gold. Steve Gold was a CIS executive. He worked at Varonis Solutions at the time, and we sold some data privacy solutions together at common customers. I got to know Steve. Steve moved over to CIS and brought me along with him. So I was the first cloud sales representative at CIS a number of years ago.
I think that's one of the coolest things in our space. A good mentor of mine, Josh Copeland, you find that the right people bring the right people with them from job to job. So that's awesome to hear. You were brought into CIS. We're happy you're with them. This webinar series, Rich, what could you kind of hope our listeners are able to walk away from after visiting us every week?
Yeah, well, my goal in trying to support you in this series, Zach, is we like to help out our members. You're a great member of ours, and I wanted to support you and your company personally. But CIS is a nonprofit. We're mission based. We're all about spreading the word, creating awareness. I'm trying to create awareness in the MSP space for using the controls and our secure configuration guidelines from the benchmarks. And my goal is to connect with more people in the MSP community and hopefully encourage more people to follow our guidelines.
Awesome. And Henry, to our moderator, I did get some feedback in the background that the LinkedIn might still be in the waiting room. I'm not sure if there's a way to double check that. But in the case that we are, okay, so we're going to keep it going. Do you want us to restart, Henry, or do I need to do something on my side with logging in?
Do we have people on with us or no?
As you can tell, everyone, if you are listening, this is our first live webinar, learning the new platform Restream. Okay. And I did get feedback. It was the wrong link on the, yeah. So you see that as well. Henry just sent the new link. So why don't we kind of kick this as a restart really quick, Henry? What do you think?
Yeah, see, people are just joining now. So, okay.
Okay.
Bear
Sorry
with
about
us.
the delay, everyone. I understand Restream, first time using the new platform for our live webinars. Glad we got the link adjusted now. But welcome to the CIS and Senteon webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. I'm your host, Zach from Senteon, and here's my co-host, Rich from CIS.
Hello, Zach.
Appreciate you being here, Rich. So before we go too deep into the webinar series with what it's about, what you can expect, I'd love to first introduce ourselves. Rich, do you mind just sharing a quick intro of yourself and how you ended up at CIS?
Absolutely, Zach. Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining us. Sorry about the slow start here, I guess, but we're figuring this out real time. So thanks for joining us and bear with us. So yeah, I'm an upstate New York guy, Zach, and I grew up in Rochester, New York. I graduated from Rochester Institute of Technology. I still live locally in the area. I spent some time at Apple Computer. I worked at a software company that was acquired by IBM. I spent most of my career at IBM. I kicked out to an organization called CIS Computer Solutions and led a security practice in upstate New York. We did a lot of security architecture reviews and worked with a lot of organizations to implement point solutions around data privacy and identity management, things like that. During that time, I met Steve Gold, who worked at Varonis. Steve ultimately was an executive at CIS in our sales organization. He brought me along to CIS after we had done some deals together. And I was the first cloud sales representative at CIS working for Steve.
That is very cool.
If you don't know Steve, he's an awesome guy. He now is at Gotham Technologies and still is very much involved with CIS. And connect with Steve if you don't know him. Awesome human.
Well, we appreciate that you're still at CIS. You're a great partner to us and a great member of CIS. So appreciate that introduction, Rich. And
how about yourself, Zach? Tell us more about you.
Yeah, so I am the co-founder to Senteon. Senteon ultimately is streamlining the OS hardening process, or rather the process to implement all 400 plus of the CIS benchmarks. So we'll be diving into what that means later today. And basically what I really want this webinar series to be is very educational. Something I've very much noticed throughout growing Senteon to what it is today is the CIS benchmarks, although are important, known to be best practices, it's not always understood what types of risks they mitigate. So my goal for this series, alongside Rich, is to really help educate and provide context on all of these configuration recommendations. So let's kick off into the presentation. We do have about 10 slides today. I anticipate every slide to take about 4 to 5 minutes. And we should have a handout in the comments coming if it's not already there for you to follow along with. A little bit of a deeper dive on some of the topics. So to kick off, we want to first dive into the threat landscape that is today. You can't talk about security recommendations without first understanding what the challenges are. So I'm going to hand this off to Rich to open up, but could you talk about what you're really seeing in the cyber threat landscape? What types of attacks are becoming more common? Could you just talk towards this?
Yeah, thanks, Zach, for sure. So CIS is in a unique position to really see all of the threats in real time through the MS ISAC and EI ISAC that we run, which are security operations centers that help state, local governments secure their organizations as well as our elections infrastructure. So we see in real time net flow data and we do threat analysis and threat hunting. What we're seeing, Zach, is all of the tags in your cloud bubble. We see all of those stuff's happening with ransomware and phishing being right at the top of the list. But the biggest trend is sophistication. And, the bad actors are increasingly have access to better and better tools and more sophisticated attacks along the same themes.
I love that you said are gaining more access to better and better tools. One one of the most interesting things that I've really gotten to learn about being in the security space for this long is that these cyber criminals, I mean, they run their enterprises just like a normal business. They're always trying to improve. They make investments. They want their attacks, not to get stopped. They have to improve because the good guys, aka us, CIS, and every other security vendor, are making it more difficult for them. So I just love you said that. I had to call that out a little bit more.
Are you hearing any, what are you hearing from the MSP space specifically, Zach? What are the most common threats?
Oh man, MSPs. Well, first of all, shout out to all the MSPs. I mean, you guys are the backbone to every small and medium enterprise because there is just too many layers of security that you just can't expect a business owner who has no security background to just figure out, or that single IT technician to also take on security. So MSPs are just absolutely critical. And the things that they're talking to me about the most right now is how can I mitigate the risk of a ransomware attack? I do phishing training, but I still have employees or clients rather who click these links. What can I do to mitigate the blast radius? What if I just accept that this is going to happen? Is there ways to prevent it from being worse than it has to? So those are really the deep topics I get into with them. And as we'll get into the CIS benchmarks, we're going to talk about how those can help mitigate the lateral movement, mitigate privilege escalation, mitigate the impact post-clicking a phishing link. And that's the really cool thing about the CIS benchmarks in this series. We'll dive really deep into all these. And talking about MSPs being the backbone to the SMB community, could you kind of, I guess, who should be really listening to this webinar series? Is there a certain business persona type? Talk towards who's at risk.
Well, we're seeing increasingly that larger organizations are more sophisticated and more mature with their cybersecurity policy and have the resources internally to support infrastructure. We're really seeing that the smaller organizations are at risk because they don't have the tools and resources, and just really raising awareness among those people that support those organizations and in helping, give them cost-effective best practice in a plan to follow so that they can really improve their maturity level and follow a process to mitigate their exposure to those most common risks.
Yep. And one thing I want to also call out for this presentation, there is going to be an interactive Q&A, so please fill up the comments. We do have our moderator looking through these, and he did just mention that there was a good story that was posted. So Henry, if you don't mind just bringing that up so we can all see that. The insurance company told them the guys who were ransomware them had great customer service and they should pay the ransom. That is an awesome story from our friend Steb. And that's just so true. These ransomware criminals, they want to entice you to pay them to give you the key to your data. It's absolutely incredible. Rich, have you ever seen anything like this?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many stories and so many unfortunate circumstances that people are going through and will continue to go through, unfortunately. So there's a lot of work to do in the space to protect other people and ourselves.
Absolutely. Thanks for the story, Steb. And before we go over to the next slide, I mean, there are a lot more risks than just having to pay for a ransomware key, because if you do that, regulators are now requiring you to disclose you had a cyber breach. And that's going to impact not just your, business uptime, the daily workflows that you need to operate, the reputation. You're disclosing this to your consumers. If you're running a medical practice, I mean, even just a retail store and PCI data is lost. I mean, if I was a consumer with, no security knowledge, that would still matter to me. I mean, I even have my mom talking to me about security stuff, and she's never in my lifetime been in this space. So it's very interesting how the consumers are really starting to ask questions. One thing that Rich and I were talking about in the pre-show is the level of transparency. Rich, before to wrap up this slide, do you see businesses having to start providing a level of transparency to what they're doing with their security posture, how they're secure? I mean, is that level of transparency going to start happening with consumers, or is it already happening?
Well, the consumer, Zach, I think it's a really great point because the consumer is becoming much more educated and aware of the risks that their data, their private data has. Their private data has value, and people know that and understand that now. So they're really starting to demand knowing and understanding that their data is being kept secure, and it really can turn into a competitive advantage for those organizations that have policies in place and can demonstrate to their customers that they are taking proper care of their data and information.
Yep, I agree with that completely. So now that we understand more about this threat landscape, let's dive a little bit deeper into the CIS benchmarks with the basics. So just to kind of kick this off, we did provide a visual explaining how the CIS benchmarks fit into the CIS controls and other frameworks. And we will be doing a handout. I believe there's some trouble linking it to the comments, but we will be sending out a PDF with a deeper dive on this topic. But Rich, could you kind of introduce what the CIS benchmarks are?
Yeah, Zach, very simply, the CIS benchmarks are a very prescriptive guide to the proper security configuration settings for various types of devices and things like cloud platforms. We have benchmarks for operating systems, network devices. I think we have over 100 benchmarks in all kinds of different categories that are it's a secure configuration guide. It will, following those guidelines will minimize your risk of exposure to having a non-secure configuration.
Yep, and hundreds of different benchmarks, but I know Senteon is very focused specifically on workstations and server benchmarks, and there can be hundreds of recommendations just in a single benchmark guide. So it encompasses a lot. What about how they're developed, Rich? Could you go into this? And as threats do become more sophisticated, how are they updated?
Yeah, for sure. So the development process that we have for our benchmarks is really part of the value of them. It's a unique process that we have, and it's community driven. So we have a tool. It's a portal tool on our website. It's called Workbench. And in the Workbench, there's communities, and communities identify. We're community driven, and community will identify a need for a specific benchmark and create a community in our Workbench. And what the community does is they establish the scope of the benchmark. Volunteers create discussion threads on the website, and we organize and manage experts from different parts of IT and cybersecurity, and to basically stress test all of the settings for that particular piece of technology. And so they go through and will run those common attacks, against an operating system, and adjust those settings until the risk is minimized as much as possible and your workload will still run.
That makes sense.
So then over time, we do keep them current as, technology changes. The community will update our benchmarks. Generally, it's about 90 days since it is a community consensus process. If Microsoft has a major release, we get previews. We're a close relationship with Microsoft, but it takes our community a bit of time, maybe about 90 days after a major release, for us to have a new benchmark published for the community.
Wow. Yeah, that can be definitely a intense process with new CVEs coming out. I mean, 90 days to review. It's needed though, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, if you ever use Cliff Notes in school, these are the Cliff Notes. I mean, the work has been done. You just need to consume, and we try to make that easy for people.
It's awesome. And I know Senteon, being a CIS benchmark user, we very much leverage all of these resources because security vendors are always popping up, solving a new problem. But what's different of being able to partner with CIS and the benchmarks is that, we're not coming into the space saying, hey, this is what you should do because we say so. We're able, as a vendor partner of CIS, to lean on them and say, hey, it's not our recommendations. These recommendations are coming straight from CIS, straight from this community. So thank you for all you guys do at CIS and allowing us to be partners.
Yeah, and if can I add one more thing I probably
Yeah.
should have said to begin with? The other thing that's great about benchmarks is the secure configuration guidelines are recognized by many frameworks like PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, others. And what's nice about that is if you have customers in those regulated industries or yourself are facing regulatory compliance, using a CIS secure benchmark configuration is an element of compliance. And I was joking with Zach earlier that, who loves benchmarks? Auditors. Because if you can demonstrate that you are configuring your systems to the CIS benchmark standards, auditors, audits go really easy. And, I know Senteon has tools to help you demonstrate that compliance. And, maybe Zach, you could share more on that even.
Yeah, I mean, the auditors is a great point. Building Senteon, we actually intended this to be a very strict security first solution, which it still is. But the more and more we learned about the auditing space and how the benchmarks are, they're not required, but they are loved in the auditing field. We built out reporting to show this, ability to show when a configuration changes, who changes this configuration, how long it was out of compliance, and all of the reports that are very, very valuable to streamline this process. So thanks for the plug there, Rich. Going a little bit deeper into CIS as a whole, we talked about community a lot, but could you really, I guess, how do people get involved? You mentioned the workbench a little bit, and Henry, if you could drop a comment into the live stream with the workbench link, but talk to us more about that.
Yeah, I think the audience here is a great set of candidates. Maybe some people already participate, but I would encourage you to just join the workbench. And join some of the communities. It's a learning experience. You can see the current threats, or not necessarily threats, but challenges, I should say, that organizations are facing. And we would love to see your guidance and feedback on, organizations that are actually using benchmarks. Maybe you're using a certain application with a particular benchmark and there's a conflict between settings or something. We love to get that feedback so we can adjust, in sharing with the community really helps everybody.
It's awesome to hear. And going into that next slide, Henry, you made it sound like anyone can get involved. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. It's 100% accurate. We have, I forget the number. I think it's maybe like 10,000 volunteers worldwide. And
wow.
it
That's
is
amazing.
A worldwide effort. Yep. In what, it's vendor agnostic. It's a group of, smart people at CIS that have established this process and kind of oversee it in management, but it's very much dependent on community participation, both from the vendors on the technology partner side, as well as folks like joining today's session.
And one thing that you educated me on that I wasn't familiar, Rich, these documents, I mean, they're free to the public, and I think you even offer a little bit more to nonprofits, K through 12. Could you kind of talk about how CIS is, they're nonprofit, community driven, but that they're also giving back?
Yeah, good point, Zach. So CIS, we provide all of our benchmarks in PDF format on our website for free. You can, as many of you probably know, you can download those and use them for guidelines. We have tools through our Secure Suite memberships that help you operationalize those benchmarks and assess your systems and things like that, that you can get through Secure Suite membership. We provide those memberships to state and local government organizations and tribal territories, as well as K through 12 schools. We provide nonprofits a heavy discount on membership and things like that. We have, I don't know, I think 15,000 members. So it's a wide thing. There's also an opportunity, I feel like, Zach, for people that might be joining this call. There's many of those organizations that have our tools and could use help operationalizing them. And, that is something that, I think the MSP space is really an opportunity for you guys, and it's something that I'm trying to evangelize a little bit from a CIS standpoint.
Absolutely. The MSP space, and I'm screaming echoes, but it's been heavily underserved. I mean, end of the day, I've heard stories of MSPs trying to take enterprise technology and making it work in a multi-tenant environment. I mean, there's not a lot of solutions like Senteon that's really designed multi-tenancy to help with this process. So spot on, agree.
And what have you guys done, Zach, to give back to the community? I know you guys are quite active, and including this series. I mean, this is as a form of giving back, right?
Yeah, this series is definitely something crazy that we're giving back. This is exciting for me to kind of share a lot of the war stories I've had to overcome and learn from, just about the benchmarks. And one big thing that we're doing to give back outside of just this is that we do provide access to our free compliance mapping database, which basically is taking all of those CIS benchmarks. It includes all of the descriptions, the rationale, the potential impact straight from the CIS benchmark document into a very easy searchable database. But what we did was we took that a step further to say, hey, this benchmark belongs to this type of compliance or regulated framework, such as SOC 2, PCI DSS, HIPAA. I mean, it's very cool because we had a very interesting assumption that businesses didn't necessarily want to strive to meet every single benchmark. We've talked about how they're difficult. But the most interesting finding that I've really gotten to see over time is that MSPs really want to meet all of the benchmarks. And that's a challenge. But they aren't just doing the minimum. So kudos to every MSP doing it the right way out there. Awesome. So we're reaching the halfway point of the presentation. So definitely keep on tossing questions if they are coming in. I'm going to switch gears and talk about what you can expect in the next few weeks, well, rather few months. There are a lot of benchmarks to cover in our webinar series. So overall, we're going to be focusing on the Windows Workstation and Server Operating System benchmarks. So there are a lot, well over 400. I think the number is closer to 450 benchmarks in the respective operating systems. So we will be defining what these are, how they mitigate risk from a security point of view. So really taking this a step deeper than what documentation does today. And just like today, we're always going to have interactive Q&A. So if you're an engineer out there, an admin out there, or an owner or a compliance officer, we'd love to hear your questions and learn what value you're hoping to get from the series yourself. And the best thing is we'll be bringing some guests. So Rich, do you want to expand a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about in the weeks to come?
Yeah, sure, Zach. So I'm really excited because I think it's for me personally, it's an opportunity to engage with the MSP community. I encourage people to try and connect with me on LinkedIn. If anyone's going out to Denver next week for the MSP conference out there, I'll be there Sunday through Tuesday. Hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll meet. That would be awesome. No, what I'm really hoping, we're always trying to extend our mission, and we want to create awareness. We want to help people become more secure in the most cost-effective ways possible. And, I think there's an opportunity to really take some of these tools and so forth, and really use them for competitive advantage and really help to, take our tools and, secure people and make some money along the way.
Now that is something I love that you said. Use it to really differentiate themselves, kind of stand out. So something I've learned since taking Senteon and growing it to what it is today is that having a standardized baseline across dozens of clients was a little bit of a rarity, but it wasn't something that they weren't aware was important. They wanted to, they just didn't have a simple solution or ability to do that. So by attending this webinar series, learning more about the benchmarks, the ways you're able to implement these, I feel is going to really differentiate you from a security point of view. And I did mention this with guests. We are going to have a different guest every week because just like CIS, we want this webinar series to be community driven. And here, actually, we already have quite the guest lineup built. I mean, the support we've gotten for this webinar series is definitely much more than I ever expected. Having MSP leaders like Ray Orzini, Wes Spencer coming on, but also having some enterprise executives, Josh Copeland, the unpopular opinion guy from AT&T popping in, Tyler Cohen Wood, definitely huge in the CMMC space. And it's amazing to hear the support because every member on this screen has either asked me or accepted an invitation to come in and talk about a different section of the CIS benchmarks. So yeah, Rich, I mean, what does this mean? I mean, how cool is this? Is it a big deal?
I think it's awesome because that's some amazing brain power on that slide. And my vision for this is it's going to be less of me talking and maybe less of you talking and more of them talking, because I think that's really going to be where, I mean, they're going to be demonstrating how CIS has affected their business, and the experiences that they're going to bring to the webinar, I think is going to be fantastic.
Exactly. Not just how CIS has impacted their business, but also the challenges they've come across. We've kept hinting at this. These benchmarks are 400 plus different configuration policy recommendations that can be difficult to implement without disrupting workflows. I mean, that's the bottom line. The more security you have, the less usability there is. So by having each of these respective guests with their own respective backgrounds, we're going to be able to hear the challenges they faced. So next week, we'll be having Roddy joining us for section 1.1 with password policy. And then we're going to be moving into account lockout policies, user right assignments. I mean, we're diving into each of these benchmarks individually and hearing the real stories. I mean, I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So this is the part of the presentation. Henry, if there are questions, I'd love to go over here. Please feel free to post some onto the restream if there are any live questions. Otherwise, Rich and I did prepare some just conversation topics for us to talk about. And just kind of, yeah, some softballs. Us sales, go-to-market guys, we do love our softballs. So, Rich, we've talked about these benchmarks quite a bit. We hinted on the controls and the implementation groups, but are every benchmark mapped back to a respective control or implementation group?
No, they're not. And it is something that many of the benchmark recommendations are mapped back to a CIS control, but not all of them. And it is a goal of ours when we're bringing out new benchmarks to have all of the controls mapped, or all of the benchmark recommendations mapped to the CIS control. It's not that way yet, but I think we'll get there eventually.
That is very exciting. That's definitely something on a wish list for us as a vendor partner.
Yeah.
And we're talking about workstations and servers, which are all GPO recommendations. But you did talk about how the benchmarks encompass much more than just OS hardening. So they're not just all GPO recommendations, right?
No, yeah, absolutely, Zach. So we're doing a lot with the cloud platform providers. We have foundation benchmarks for each of the different major cloud platforms. We've done direct integrations with AWS and Azure, and we're a top 10 seller in each of those marketplaces with the hardened operating systems that we create and offer in the marketplaces on the cloud platforms. So we cover cloud platforms, network devices, mobile devices, workstations, a really wide range of devices. Not everything, but a lot. And
that is awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, and another little plug for CIS. We haven't really mentioned MITRE today, or MITRE Attack, or MITRE Defend, but I am familiar that CIS does work with them a little bit, specifically with a community defense model. Could you introduce what that is and how it came to be?
Yeah, the community defense model is something we worked with MITRE in back a ways back when controls were at a version 7 level, and the goal is the CIS controls and the MITRE attack framework are very complementary. First, organizationally, MITRE and CIS are both, platform and product independent, which is great. So it's kind of a good fit for us working together in organizationally. The controls are policies to protect against attack, and MITRE defines the
Hmm.
attacks. So it's we test the controls against the MITRE attack framework, and it's really a great partnership that we have with them, and it's something that we value and will continue to work with. So, our goal is to kind of stay in sync with the MITRE attack framework as it evolves. We evolve, and trying to protect the community.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm going to take that a step further with you, Rich. And I'm actually going to go ahead and share our screen so I can give a little preview of what Senteon's gift is for all of our viewers here. So go ahead and go here. To really show this, what CIS has done is they've mapped out all of the benchmarks and they've taken that to show exactly where it fits within MITRE. So you have MITRE Attack, MITRE Defend, and you can see exactly how each different respective policy, whether it's password policies, account lockout, but you can see the type of MITRE attack tactic and the technique that it is actually mitigating, or rather in this case, the defend.
I love
And
that view, Zach.
yeah, I mean, I know when I showed you this for the first time, you were pretty impressed with the feasibility and just the usability of this. I mean, I guess, Rich, from your point of view, why is this so cool?
Just to see it laid out, it's something that people ask for. I see Jennifer has a question, so I'm looking at Jennifer's question, trying to talk at the same time. But just to be able to, I love how you can kind of mix and match in this screen and
Hmm.
choose between different frameworks, and it's just an awesome view because it's typically a lot of manual work to show this. And we have
Absolutely.
mappings and spreadsheets and so forth, but you've got a dynamic view that's really great.
Absolutely. And to take this a step further before I stop giving this preview, you can also click into any of these settings and you can see exactly from CIS the description of what this is, the rationale for doing it, and what it means impact-wise. And to take that a step further, some members here may be following STIGs, so we do have the STIG information. But focusing on the MITRE topic, we're showing exactly the attack technique, what this may be doing, the MITRE defend, what this is working with. And then again, we are focusing heavily on compliance. So we're letting you know if it's an equivalent mapping, a subset, a superset, so that MSPs and enterprises alike can really map this out and have an easy to use reporting spectrum to prove their baseline and prove their standards. So
Yeah, kind of demonstrate that best effort for cybersecurity that's critical for folks trying to get insurance policies and things like that.
mhm. No, that's awesome, and very much kudos to CIS and MITRE working together. Those are two of the best organizations to be given recommendations like that. And I don't have access to view the comments, but I did
I
hear
see
Jen has a
Jennifer's
question.
question. Oh, there it is. Jennifer asked, will you be addressing the business impact of not following standards and regulations? To some extent, Jennifer. Yeah, it's interesting. So in the tooling and in the implementing benchmarks, and Senteon helps with this, you're not going to be able to get 100% compliance. We don't expect that. But what is really important is understand the risk that you're adopting by not following a particular recommendation, and being able to have an opportunity to document why you're not following that recommendation, maybe have that signed off by a CISO, or,
Yep.
Put a date on it and maybe a follow-up even. We have to leave this, we have to have a 8-character password because of application XYZ. A 14-character password, which is our recommendation, breaks the application. So you can't break the application, right? Work has to go on. So you can document that, and you can sort of recognize that risk that you're adopting by not following the recommended standard, and then try to improve over time.
That's a spot on answer, and something I've really learned about being part of this implementation process with our partners is that if you do annotate the reason you accepted that risk, the auditor is going to treat it a little bit better for you because you're acknowledging it, you have an approver, and as Rich said, the review date, those are critical documentation pieces that are becoming more and more needed. So great response to that, Rich. Very cool. Any other questions in there, Henry? We good? Okay. So going into the next slide, want to talk about the high-level implementation strategies to inputting the CIS benchmarks. So there is a lot that goes into this, but we tried to water this down to 5 high-level steps. And the first one is honestly why we're all here today, with understanding the benchmarks. So we'll be breaking these down week by week. There is the free resource from CIS to understand it, or the database that I shared is free for everyone. But you got to understand what these are. The next step is to assess your current security status. So this could be running a gap assessment, comparing your current configs against the recommendations, and knowing which gaps maybe are there intentionally. Something I will note, I actually learned from a CIS webinar of my own, is out of the box, when you upgrade a Windows Home system to a Windows Pro, it comes only about 20% compliant with CIS recommendations. I mean, Rich, would you ever accept 80% of a risk with your business?
No, it's bad, definitely. And I mean, when I worked on the cloud team at CIS, people would talk about, starting a Windows server on AWS and just applying workload without adjusting settings, and I'll be like, oh, don't do that. Stop. It's not good.
Yep.
Microsoft leaves services open, just so applications run easy, and Linux vendors do the same thing. It's common. They want to make it easy for your applications to run, but it's not a security first, delivery.
Absolutely. And I mean, business has to run, right? And this kind of leads us to the benchmark implementation. Once you know which benchmarks you want to implement, you have to figure out how. Senteon is a big proponent of providing implementation at a click, but today the most general ways to do this is doing ad hoc PowerShell scripts, applying template solutions, and just I guess trusting the process that it did implement successfully and doesn't drift out of compliance over time. But that's really the risk. I mean, we could probably talk about drift for a whole nother section, Rich.
How does Senteon help with that?
Senteon does track the changes as I talked about, but this concept of configuration drift, Rich, this is something we've really
big issue. Yeah. I mean, I always, when I talk to people, I always, bring up the fact that, especially with small organizations, that, security is not a check the box exercise. You need to really have constant care and feeding, and you need to understand, what your configurations are looking like, because misconfiguration is still a top threat vector in general. It just leaving a port open, or something inconfigured just a little bit sometimes makes a big difference in your security posture.
Absolutely. And once you do get that in there, it is going to be a constant ongoing process. That fourth step is to review and adjust. You may realize some of the configurations you want it to meet are going to take a little bit more legwork before you can actually implement this without causing disruption. So having
that's what I like about your tool. It kind of it makes that continuous motion that's necessary, kind of automates that continuous motion that organizations need.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a hard process to automate, and you have to have someone doing it. So spot on with that. And then it's just making sure continuously updating and making sure if a new CVE comes out, we heard about Print Nightmare a couple years back. I mean, making sure you're up to date. So
Yep.
very awesome. But that is going to conclude the bulk of the presentation. So want to just kind of conclude with how to keep up with us, how to watch. So we will be hosting this series from LinkedIn Live. We are looking at putting this on a few other platforms, but we will be posting the recording to our Senteon YouTube channel. The next presentation is going to take place Friday, June 16th on password policy. So the benchmarks have about 8 different recommendations, ranging from complexity, length, some legacy configurations that should definitely be modified. And Roddy's going to join us to talk about that. Later in the month, we do have Rafi and Ken joining us for a couple other sections as well. Very, very excited. So we
So
will
excited.
be,
Yeah.
excited to have you here with me, Rich.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so wrapping up and next steps, everyone. Follow along. I will be sending out calendar invites to everyone, but we are going to be looking at creating a Discord community. As we talked about, these configurations can be disruptive. Identifying which configurations are causing various applications to have challenges is very, very valuable. So we want to try to build a community around this and identify what those troublesome configurations are and have a place for us to post the recordings and the handouts and the speaker notes, etc. So very, very excited to get that rolling. Hopefully it will be up and live before the next webinar. Additionally, Rich and I are active on LinkedIn. So please connect with us. We'd love to have you following us and following the series.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I'm really excited to get some of those guests engaged, and I think that's really where the real value is going to be for folks, and it's going to be a great series. It's like I'm excited.
I'm excited as well. See what guests we can have on and what stories can be told. So thank you everyone who attended today, and enjoy the recording if you do watch it later.